Have you ever had a friend say to you, "I can't wait for a zombie apocalypse, it'll be so much fun," or have you even said that yourself? Did you or they think that traversing through the barren wastelands of a once bustling city, scavenging for food and supplies while wearing elaborate Mad Max-style leather armor, taking down any zombies that come your way in a spectacular fashion? Maybe you even make a little quip after taking down a group of them in a supermarket, perhaps, "I hate Black Friday," or something equally terrible. And yeah, your voice is super gravelly now for some reason. In your mind, is it a world where it's every person for themselves? Maybe you have a small group of people you travel with because they happen to also be healthy, competent, attractive, and they fit the character types that balance you out. Like, you could have a serious one that's seen some stuff, the caring one, a child who serves as a reminder that the future's at stake, and don't forget the badass, the one that's more badass than you are. And of course, you wouldn't refer to them as zombies, no, that'd be way too obvious. You'd have to change it to something less on the nose, almost like every other product in the genre, perhaps grabbers, or chasers, or bitey boys. This all might sound appealing, and there's an ungodly amount of movies, TV shows, and games that do a great job of selling this lifestyle to audiences. And I'll admit, it does seem fun, but let's be honest, if it was possible to have a zombie apocalypse, very few of us would be survivors, let alone thriving or even enjoying the experience. There's a good chance you'd get infected within a few days and then turn. Most of the world probably would, especially if it was an airborne virus that caused it. Sadly, the majority of survivors would probably be the wealthy and perhaps a few weirdo libertarian doomsday preppers who would last until they were forced to leave their bunkers for supplies. One thing you'll find in pretty much everything in the zombie genre though is that in a situation like a zombie apocalypse, the real enemy isn't the undead, it's the other humans and their selfishness. This, however, isn't a trait exclusive to the antagonists of the genre. There's often decisions protagonists have to make that could be considered morally grey. For example, if they should encounter a person on their own struggling and with no supplies, should they be helped? On one hand, they could be helpful to your need for survival. They can help out by finding supplies, they can be another pair of eyes to watch out for attackers, and if they're capable, they can aid with defense. On the other hand, they could just be another mouth to feed in a world where food and water is hard to come by. They could be a liability should you come under attack, or in more extreme cases, they could be playing you like a damn fiddle and only want to join you so they can eventually rob you, kill you, or even sow discord among your group, causing more problems. This is one of the problems with individualism as an ideology. If a person is only out for oneself, then it's safe to assume that others are only out for oneself too. And in a world where fear of the other is being sold to us on a daily basis, to the point where elections are won on the back of that idea, it's easy to see that should a situation similar to a zombie apocalypse came to be, then we as humans might indulge our worst instincts and refuse to help each other out in order to survive. But if the end game of survival is solitude or restricting yourself to a small group of people for the rest of your life, then what good is this? As we're all very, very, very well aware at this point, coronavirus aka COVID-19 has joined the list of existential threats that the human race has to deal with. I personally am in self-quarantine as I write, record and edit this video. Not because I'm infected, but because that's what we have to do now if we want to prevent it from spreading further. My wife, however, does not have the luxury of staying at home since she works in a lab where they're actually testing patient samples for the virus. So if you want to be kind, maybe leave her a little comment at the bottom of this video saying that you really appreciate the work that she's doing. It goes a long way. To be honest, social distancing and germophobia have pretty much been my life story, so it hasn't affected me too much, but as someone who already feels anxiety whenever I so much as leave the house to get groceries, I get to experience even more of it now, knowing that anyone could be carrying a potentially fatal virus. I'm fortunate though in that in general I'm a healthy person who very rarely gets ill, but of course there are many people out there who aren't and are immunocompromised, such as the elderly, disabled and those with weak immune systems. Many governments across the world have reacted to the existence of COVID-19 in some amazing ways, from coming up with methods of testing masses of people as quickly as possible, extending sick leave, decontamination booths, putting a stop to travel, preventing gatherings of large groups, putting holds on utility bills, including internet, and making it so that people can't be evicted during this time if they're unable to pay rent. Some corporations have also reacted to it as well, such as movie theaters, theme parks, and concert venues closing down, and stores limiting their hours of operation and the amount of people who are allowed in. Some internet service providers such as Comcast and AT&T have suspended data caps too, making people ask, couldn't you have been doing this the whole time? To which the answer is yes, they absolutely could have, and they should have. They just choose not to. Don't get me wrong though, there are many things that every corporation could do to improve this situation, like actually having the decency to give workers paid leave instead of waiting for governments to force them to, which they more than likely won't because we live in hell, and employees have no rights. There's a lot of things the wealthiest people in the world could be doing, like donating money towards the production of essential goods and improving and expanding healthcare facilities. Elon Musk offered to make more ventilators if there's a shortage, which there is, so keep an eye on him and see if he follows through with it. Don't worry though, in these difficult times we have celebrities helping us with this terrible and tone-deaf rendition of John Lennon's Imagine. People are struggling to stay afloat since they're not able to work, but at least rich celebrities are there to keep us grounded. They don't have to worry about paying their mortgage for their luxury houses, so their time in quarantine means that they have more time to entertain us.
I wish I had kids right now, I'm so bored.
Given that a few weeks have passed since we started this nightmare, we've all learned a few lessons about how to deal with a pandemic like this, and in general we're reacting to it quite well. Of course, we could be doing a lot better, and not only have we had some of the worst people give some of the worst advice or straight up underplay how serious the situation is, we've had decades of media teaching people how to react to situations like this in terrible ways. So today we're going to look at why the zombie genre has taught us how to react to pandemics in the worst ways possible.
Part 1.
Don't trust anyone. In most zombie media, we usually follow a small group of protagonists trying to survive the apocalypse. More often than not, they're a collection of character types like the ones I mentioned earlier, and they'll have some form of leader. One thing that's made very clear in almost everything in zombie movies, or the zombie genre as a whole, is that collectives should be limited, and larger collectives aren't to be trusted. Going along with the theme of human beings being the real monsters, there always seems to be instances that whenever a new character is introduced, there always happens to be one or more characters within that group that immediately distrust them. Sometimes with cause, but more often than not, it's simply because they're new. To an extent, distrust is understandable when you're trying to survive. It's easy to bring yourself to think that other human beings might be a threat to you when you live in constant fear of dying, but this is a two-way street between people. For some reason, the zombie genre is insistent on telling its audiences that distrust should be a natural part of survival, and more often than not, it is valid. In Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 2, distrust is a huge theme throughout the entire story. One major instance of this is the plotline revolving around Arvo, a young Russian man that Clementine and Jane encounter while scavenging. Jane is a somewhat new member to their group and they already don't fully trust her, especially Kenny, and she's also extremely individualistic compared to many of the other characters we've seen in the game so far, and she only trusts Clementine. Or at the very least she can manipulate Clementine into trusting her to suit her own ends. When they encounter Arvo, he has a bag filled with valuable supplies, which he tries to keep from them. You as the player can choose whether to go against Jane's demands and let Arvo take the supplies, or do as she says and steal them. Regardless of your choice though, Arvo and his people will later rob and attack Clementine's group, thus confirming Jane's distrust of strangers and leaving you as the person who made the decision, be it good or bad, to question whether there's any point in doing anything good for other people. The zombie genre rarely tells us as an audience that we should try and trust other people. From a storytelling perspective, it can create a certain amount of tension and mystery by having the questions lingering in the air. But media is also a teacher, and having a me versus the world mentality can also be immensely harmful for all parties involved, even when applying that mindset to everyday life.
Look at this wonderful woman who just told me to go F myself and mind my own effing business, who just bought the entire store of paper towels, toilet paper, so that nobody else can have any.
Part 2.
Communities are a bad idea. Another thing the zombie genre teaches us is that even though small groups are okay, other groups and much larger groups aren't to be trusted, or that their success as a collective comes with a catch. They might be ruled by a despot, eliminating elderly or disabled people, or perhaps they're cannibals. Either way, the message is clear that survival as a larger collective isn't worthwhile because there has to be a cost. In our current real-life situation, of course, being in a large group is absolutely not recommended, but when facing a threat like zombies, it's hard to argue against remaining as a collective. You have more sets of eyes, more people to help defend, wider skill set available, and more chances to socialize. It's the end of the world, why wouldn't you want more than 3 or 4 people to talk to all the time? The main argument that the zombie genre tends to put forward is that with larger groups of people, there's more mouths to feed, but it tends to ignore the fact that the owner of those mouths can also contribute to the group effort. Also, I don't know how cannibalism fixes anything. You're gonna run out of people to eat soon enough, and as far as I'm aware, the closest analog to human flesh is Spam, which, even though I don't think I could tolerate more than a couple times a month. You could always go vegan too, you weirdos.
Part 3.
Be selfish. Okay, here's a hypothetical situation for you. Let's say you're in a zombie apocalypse and you found yourself a nice big stash of foods. Pick whatever you want. For me, I'll say Trader Joe's delicious chocolate-covered peanut butter-filled pretzels. However, it turns out someone else has also discovered this food at the same time as you. You're armed with a bat and they're armed with one too. What do you do here? Do you get into a bat fight, possibly maiming or killing them, or even losing the fight entirely, leaving you in a worse position than you were before? Or should you talk to this person? Perhaps explaining why you need the food. Ask them why they need them, how much you both need. Maybe you simply agree to split the stash in half and go your separate ways. You could even go a step further and ask this person if they want to team up and look for food together, even temporarily. Of course, the answer isn't so simple, but given the decades of zombie media we've consumed and how we've seen characters react to these situations, it's easy to think, well, how can I trust this other person? I have to survive, and for all I know, they might be lying. I may need to lie too in order to validate my need for this food so they'll give it to me. And what if he finds out later that I lied about how many people I need to feed? Even if we did go our separate ways after splitting the food, what's stopping this person from finding me and stealing the food, possibly even killing me for it? There are so many variables at play here, and it's something that makes the genre interesting. The need for survival introduces so many moral grey zones that it's possible you'll need to do some downright awful things in order to simply stay alive. But ask yourself this: does it need to be this way? Of course it doesn't. Things may not turn out like we expected them every time, but at the very least we can try and achieve an outcome that's beneficial to everyone. You don't need all the chocolate-covered peanut butter-filled pretzels, you need friends. At least, that's what I tell myself every time I open the bag. Thankfully, much of the zombie media we see doesn't portray selfishness as a good thing. It tends to be the case that we're presented with a dilemma for the characters when it comes to scenarios like the ones I just mentioned. I honestly can't think of the last time that I saw a movie, TV show, or game where more than one community existed and they had mutual trades of goods and services between them. Of course, if you can think of any, then please let me know in the comments. Whenever we do see someone who's selfish to an extreme, they're painted as the villain or cowardly. You root for their demise. Take for example Yeon Suk in Train to Busan, who is basically a real-life version of the trolley problem taken to the extreme. There's also Joel from The Last of Us. We saw what led to him making his decision to save Ellie, but as a result he probably doomed the human race. So it wasn't hard to be disgusted by his actions despite empathizing with him throughout the game. Look, I get that a pandemic might make you think, oh god, I need to hoard all the toilet paper I can. If I'm gonna be stuck indoors, you better believe I'll be pooping. But relax a little. Yes, you should be prepared. And honestly, you should look into buying a bidet. They're super easy to install, affordable, better for the environment, and much cleaner. It might seem weird at first, but... Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. We have an abundance of food to go around. Ludicrous amounts of it gets thrown away every single day, despite the fact that people are going starving. It's good to minimize the times you have to leave the house, but next time you go out to get groceries and you see that there's plenty of meats, milk and breads on the shelves, don't take as many as you can. Take as much as you need, maybe a little bit extra. Selfishness isn't a virtue. In situations like a pandemic, it comes at the cost of someone else's health. You might be fit and healthy, but your one shopping trip where you buy up too much might mean that someone with a weaker immune system might have to go out more than once and endanger themselves. Also, learn to make bread. It's super easy and cheap and much healthier than the pre-packaged stuff you'll buy in a supermarket. Zombie media has been a terrible teacher. I'm not saying the genre is bad. I've enjoyed plenty of things within the genre, especially video games. Telltale's The Walking Dead is probably one of my all-time favorite games, and no other game has made me cry like that until seeing that ending. The Last of Us is really good. Left 4 Dead is tremendously fun. As movies go, Train to Busan is probably one of the best zombie movies out there. Zombieland was a nice departure from the stuff you typically see in the genre. The sequel was a little flaccid, but not terrible. And of course, there's classics like Romero's Dawn of the Dead. As for TV shows, nothing really does anything for me. The Walking Dead and Fear of the Walking Dead is basically 10 seasons plus of people arguing, but I haven't watched it since season 3. Did you know the Walking Dead wiki actually has an entire page dedicated to the theme of distrust? Turns out there's quite a lot of it. But this is my point really. You don't have to distrust people to survive. The zombie genre and the post-apocalypse genre in general teaches us that survival is contingent on being suspicious of everyone, despite the fact that they all share similar needs. I know that perhaps a zombie movie where everyone gets along might not have the tense atmosphere of your traditional one, but isn't it worth trying to do something a little different? After all, we're more powerful when we work together. But if someone out there does make a zombie movie, TV show, or game that shows a community working together, please just call them zombies. Or bitey boys, I'd be fine with that too. In all seriousness, please, stay safe. Minimize the amount of times you leave the house by only going out for essentials, and if you're helped by a service worker like a grocery store employee, if you can afford to do so, please give them a tip. They're working so hard right now. Wash your hands regularly for at least 20 seconds at a time, maintain your distance from strangers, and help people if you can remain safe while doing so. This is a very real threat. We need to work together to stop it. In the meantime, if you have some spare time while in quarantine, please consider checking out my other videos. And if you like what I do, subscribing and liking really helps me out. And as always, take care of yourself, but please, take care of other people too.